loving person. All of the things that he did in that shop, you know, he'd fix a little wagon. Pop, my father-in-law, having him fix his wagon, and well, I won't tell a story about that.
Oh,
It was no, not really.
Sure?
I better not.
Oh, one thing I meant to ask about Willis Carter. I believe you said at one time that you think he may have worked at the stone quarry?
He was a stonemason. He had come to Maryland from Richmond to granite, and he worked in granite for years. But then he migrated to Guilford, and he worked in the stone quarry, which is not far from here. Mm-hmm.
Does that quarry still exist? Do you know where it is? Or where it was?
I have an idea of where it was. In fact, I remember going by there on a tour when we had the family reunion last year, and we drove by there. It's off of the old 32.
Is that what's called Guilford Road now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have to look for that. Do you remember Simpsonville?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, when it was any kind. No, wait a minute. That got washed away in 1868 for the most part.
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes they still refer. How are you doing on time, Sophie?
We're just about out. We're beeping real strong.
All right, let's change tape. Was a mechanic. I had a shop somewhere. Do you remember where that shop was?
Yes.
Was it around here?
Yes, all right. Right on the corner of Cartersville Road, the Oras Store, and right behind the store was his shop.
Tell me a little more about Oras Store. What kind of store was it?
It was general merchandise. You got everything there. You got food, you know, cereals, meats, you know, hot dogs, hamburgers,
Little bit there?
sugar, everything. But also she sold cotton, needles, lamps, because when I came to Howard County, we didn't have electric, and so she had lamps, lampshades, kerosene, some medicines, you know, liniment, aspirin.
How long was she in business?
I don't know when it began.
You know when it went out of business?
She had stopped going in the store, you know, selling. Let's see, before she got sick. So somewhere around 1978, now I'm just grabbing a figure, but somewhere, maybe a little before that. But the thing is that she would go to town every Friday and pick up her meat and her vegetables. I said meat, but actually, I think, yeah, her meat was delivered, but she'd pick up vegetables and sundries, you know, whatever she wanted for the store. And she'd get back about 4:30, 5 o'clock, something like that. But it was primarily a day that was spent in Baltimore and down around in the South Baltimore area, you know, where the wholesalers are.
Markets, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
What other, well, those are two obviously very prominent businesses that were in your family. Were there a great number of black businesses in Howard County in the old days, or?
No, and actually Pop was, to me, was just about the one black businessman. He farmed in the summer, and he cut wood in the winter. He would go go to different private owners and buy a woods, or, pay for woods, and go in and during the winter he would cut wood, not only for himself, but also to sell to other people. He was a very resourceful person. In the summer, he had a truck farm, and began, the early spring there would be peas and the like, and that basically was for home use. But then later on in the summer, he would farm to take to the market. And I can remember in the evening sitting and wiping tomatoes. And we'd wipe the tomatoes, and the big pretty tomatoes were put on the top of the basket, and they were set up and put on a truck and, taken to market. Also, we would pick apples to be taken to market. If you could picture this place, there in the southwestern corner was a field that was used just about every year for sweet potatoes. And in the fall, the sweet potatoes, when the sweet potatoes were ready, we dug those and washed them and took them to the market. There was a cornfield next to it, and that cornfield was mainly not just for eating. Let me explain. There's some corn that is used for stock, and of course that field was left to be shucked for the corn to dry out, and then they would shuck it and they would bring it up to the barn and use it for the horses. And he always had a horse or two. He had a cow. I had a couple of cows, and plenty of pigs. And of course, during the winter, there would be a kill hog, time when they'd kill hogs.
Oh, tell me. I've heard a lot about hog killing time. Tell me about hog killing time. What would happen is that in the community, other men would usually agree on the time. It had to be a time when there was frost, so that if it were warm, then that was not good for the meat, because I guess the animal heat wouldn't. I'm saying that wrong, but anyway, it would spoil. But anyhow, they'd get together and they would come and all kill hogs here, and possibly bring their hogs from their homes, because there were several homes along Guilford Road. Or else the men would get together and go to somebody else's house and kill. Did you ever see that happen? Did you ever witness
No, the women didn't necessarily become a part of that insofar as watching, what was happening. So I never really watched them do it. No.
Do you remember what came out of that? What kind of products came out of it?
Well, they made souse, they made pudding, they made lard. The back, the spine of the hog was. There were certain kind of spare ribs that I can't think of the names of all of the different things.
Sausage.
And sausage. Certain parts were kept to make sausage out of. Yeah.
It seems to have been a real sort of, at least among the men, a real community kind of thing that
Yes, it was. Yes.
brought them together to do that. Tell me a little more about the area. We were talking about the businesses. How about things like just, if you didn't shop at an Oras Store, where else was there to go around here for anything, for food, for clothing?
When I first came to Howard County, we went to Baltimore to shop, all right? In the South Baltimore area, I can remember going with Pop in there and picking up my groceries. Around Washington Boulevard, Fremont Avenue, Pratt Street, somewhere around in that area. There was also shopping done in Laurel. Not as well. I never did as much food shopping there as I did in Baltimore, but as time went by, then Acme and Safeway came to Laurel. There was another store up in Simpsonville, the Stromberg's store, on Route 29 and 32.
Oh, a long way to go.
Yeah, well, you know, now I'm talking about groceries that you stock up, groceries that you would get, you know, for short trips, then possibly some of the local store like Stromberg's or Oras Store, something like that, yes.
Now, were the Strombergs black?
No, Stromberg's was white.
Oh, so it was a white store.
Yeah.
Was it like a general store too, or was it a grocery?
Yeah, it was a general store. That's the store that became Heptic and Gaunt's. Up on before.
Oh yeah.
Before Gaunt's bought that, then Stromberg owned that.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
You were telling me before about how was it Richard who cut wood in the winter and
No, Pop Samuel Carter.
Okay, Samuel.
Yeah.
Is that typical of what most of the men did to earn a living, or what were the general things that people did to earn a living?
At that time, let's see. That was what Pop did. What the other men did, quite a few of them worked in Washington for different contractors, building, and they would, you know, travel from here to Washington or the surrounding area, maybe Laurel, but I mean, there were very few of them. I think Pop was about the only real farmer person that he was the one person that was self-employed here in Guilford. Now, he did hire some of the young men here, and the one thing that I thought was so interesting was that it was very few young men at that particular time that had not at some time worked for Pop. He's a very interesting person. He had a very strong personality, and I can remember sitting here and looking up in the yard, and he had a young boy doing something there near the woodpile, and he would be standing there beside him, and the young man would be working, and Pop's arms would be flying, and he would, but I am willing to say that he made a strong impression on most of the young men here in Guilford in one way or another. I think that he was a person who today would be, and at that time was a great image to follow. Yeah.
Gee, that's wonderful to be able to say about someone close to you. Really great. So in your experience then, there weren't too many blacks doing much farming? Is that correct?
No, yeah. Blacks did farming, but it was not something that they did to make a living. You understand? In other words, men would have farms. They would raise vegetables and the like. But then, when it came to making a living, they would, do carpenter work or pour cement or something like that.
Why was it that they couldn't make enough of a living off of farming alone?
Well, if you notice some of the things I've said about Pop, he, in the summer he farmed, but in the winter he had to do something else because, he probably didn't make enough that would carry him through the winter, and so he had to have another way of making a living in order to get by, and he raised 8 children. So he had to do many things. Now, here in this lane where he built 4 little houses, and he rented those out, and he had a house right across from his.
The rest of the neighborhood, the way something tells me it didn't look quite like this very long ago. Tell me about how the land around here looked when you first came to this area. What was it like? Obviously all these houses.
Okay, so if you envision this piece of property beginning on this side of Carter's Lane from Oakland Mills Road back to the woods, and then across to the woods that's bordering, to the west and to the south of here. All of that was owned by Sam Carter. It was used to raise vegetables. Here, this piece of land was, I think, one time I can remember he had watermelons here. There were apple trees, all kinds of fruit trees here. There were there was an old log cabin that was across the way here, and a gigantic old oak tree that stood beside it. And that log cabin was the log cabin that my father-in-law and his wife had come to when they first got married. And their son, Fred, was, I think he was born there now. Somebody don't hold me to that,
sure.
but I really don't know whether he or his father built it. I'm not sure who built it, but
needless to say, it's no longer there.
It's no longer there. In fact, my husband and I lived there, and through an accident, we had a fire and it burnt down. And my father-in-law gave us this piece of property, and my husband built this house.
Is that right? Cabin. Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
what a shame it's not here anymore.
Amen. That's true.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. You made a statement on those tapes a while ago that I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
You said that people lived inside, but they sort of lived outside too, and that you got to know the greater neighborhood area because you just sort of people didn't sort of shut themselves behind their 4 walls. They interacted with each other to such a great extent that you were also outside a great deal as well. Explain that statement, if you will.
I'm trying to remember what I said.
Let's see, your actual quote was, grandmother and sister lived, I think this is sort of transcribed a bit. You were talking about the neighborhood, just a general neighborhood and sort of life in the neighborhood. And you said something about grandmother and sister lived in the house, but we all lived outside too. We knew the greater neighborhood because. And what
Okay, I think that sounds like I may have been talking about my grandmother and her sister, who lived where we call Asbury, and they which is on the other side of Washington Boulevard, and they I don't know, we spent quite a bit of time outside. During that time, I was a little girl, and I had to come here in the summertime. I'm really trying to remember all that I meant in saying that.
Sure.
We...
Well, Joe, what kind of things did, well, okay, let me ask you about this, change the subject a little bit. What did folks do for entertainment? What did you just do for fun back then? I had one person tell me that oh, you couldn't really have fun doing anything because we were all so closely tied to the community and specifically through the church that it seemed like everything was a sin. He says, oh, you couldn't have any fun.
Yeah, I can remember in thinking about my grandmother and my great aunt that in the evenings, in the late afternoon, let us say, we would be sitting in the kitchen, and my great aunt, she could just tell some stories that, you know, and I don't mean that she fabricated anything, but that when she talked, it was so interesting, and she would say something like, she la, and la meant she said. She would, and when she talked, you know, it was such a great swelling of words, and you would imagine sitting in the kitchen at dusk with no, you know, it's getting dark, and there are no lights there, and she starts telling a story about, someone, and we'd be sitting there on edge, you know, listening. She made it so interesting. And so entertainment was the retelling of different things, not gossip, but the telling of just a story, some incident in someone's life. And that was entertainment. We didn't have television. And thank God. Because that made you use your mind. Today it all goes on before you, you know, and you more or less the product of somebody else's thoughts, whereas, you know, you at that time you read a book or you listened and you were impressed by what someone was saying.
It's a shame we don't have more of that today.
Amen.
Really,
It's so true.
People sort of put their minds on hold and let it come at them instead of inventing it within
That's right.
themselves. You know?
That's right.
That's right. Was it your mother or your grandmother that told those stories like that?
My great aunt, my grandmother's sister, and my grandmother,
What was her name?
her name was Mary Smith,
Oh, I see.
and they had come to Howard County from Prince George's County, and they had gone to school. They would write. They would write for obituaries for people. You know, when they were when someone would die, they would you know do a lot of writing for people.
Yeah. Let me ask you a little bit about how are we doing on time, Doc?
8 minutes in.
Okay. Let me ask you a little bit about. I know you've been at least somewhat influential in the civil rights involvements and movements, especially in the early '60s. Let me ask you a little bit about that. When and specifically why? What moved you to become involved in civil rights activism? And when did that take place?
Would you believe John Kennedy ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for it. And that was a catalyst, an impetus that made me begin to think about my community. At first, I was not that involved. I was a member of the Asbury Methodist Church, and becoming involved in certain religious aspects of the church. But then, as I thought about that, I wanted to contribute something to the community. And so, as a result, I became involved in the housing, and specifically the rehabilitation housing in Fells Lane.
Yes, tell me all about that.
And I was on the housing committee of the NAACP, and our argument at that particular time with the county was that there was a need for public housing. And so in order to show the need, we did a survey of Fells Lane. We wanted to show that people were not economically able to support a housing development that would not be publicly funded. And of course, at that particular time, we had the county commissioners, and Charlie Miller was the chairman of that. And they did not want to have it federally funded. And so we had to prove that there was this need and that the people were unable to pay for them. You know, there was a need for housing. One thing that had happened was that in Fells Lane, the houses were, you know, broken down, they were wooden, and a family had, a fire had occurred, and the family had been burned out, and I think maybe someone had been caught in the fire, all right? And so, I now, you know, don't hold me to all of that, but it was something of that, nature. Yes,
to get the ball rolling.
Yes.
Understand. How are we doing on time, Doc?
12 minutes.
Okay. So it's John Kennedy's speech that
it was John Kennedy's speech that really, you know, started me thinking and saying, you know, hey, I want to make a difference, and I still feel that way. I want to make a difference wherever I am. I want that whatever the condition is, wherever I am, whatever the problem is, I want to make a contribution toward making it better.
Too bad a lot of people don't feel that way.
Well,
yeah. Let's change tape, Doc. Let's take a second. Yes.
of course, at that time, desegregation was going on, and the NAACP was really involved in, you know, getting the schools desegregated. And I had thought about it, and I was talking with Evora, and I told her, I said, you know, the NAACP is doing one aspect of integration, but they're not allowing, they have their ideas, but they're not allowing people to really get together and talk. And perhaps people would feel better if they were able to talk with each other. And we began to plan forums. And we put together forums wherein we talked with the county commissioners. We had meetings at Guilford Elementary School. The county commissioners came. Various civic leaders came. And we created a climate where people got together and began to discuss the problems, the housing, the school integration. It was really something. And as a result of this, the Howard County Human Relations Council was started. And now, remember that Howard County had an interracial commission, and that's what it was called at that time, the Howard County Interracial Commission. And that was a commission that people were appointed to. So this is different from the Howard County Human Relations Council, okay? And I became a member of the commission. And of course, later on, the name was changed to the Howard County Human Relations Commission. Okay.
And what kinds of things were you?
But the Human Relations Council, we integrated. We had blacks and whites. We worked together. And we set up, we had forums, we had workshops, seminars, Wayman Scott, Reverend Holland, Reverend Otter. Reverend Otter was one of our presidents. We had quite a county cross-section of people. And I think we did a dynamite job during those years. I really do. I really do. We we had a seminar on alcoholism and drug abuse. So we not only did we focus in on housing and education, but we also focused in on community problems.
Gee, that's great. That's pretty much how it got started here.
Yeah, that was really how people got together and were able to relate to each other, were able to understand each other, and we made some friends. We really made some friends.
What was the reaction of the older black citizens of the county at that time? Did they welcome this kind of thing? Did they jump right in and help, or?
No, and that's understandable, because many people would rather stay in the things that they're used to. Many people would rather not venture out into an interracial setting. And remember even, too, that while we worked at integrating housing and education, also 11 o'clock on Sunday, all right, was one time of the greatest united division in the world, and that was in religion. Understand that even we worked for housing, we worked for equal housing, we worked for equal education, and yet we went to our own separate churches. you know. But I would say that today that is changing. It's amazing because, you know, God is the one God. He made us all. And yet when we made choices for a religious practice, it was separated. But also, at that time, it was the beginning of an integration of religion. We began to say, hey, well, maybe we should try this. At that particular time, I was a member of the United Methodist Church, and of course, that's a good example of being separated because they were separated. There was the black, there was the white church, but we began then to have our conferences together.
That's yes. I remember you talking about that in the past. What about, you expressed a fear before about the younger blacks today perhaps growing complacent in recognizing discrimination in the future. Is that true or no? Could you explain that? Do you have such a fear?
Wait a minute now. You said they became complacent. What does?
Well, I think if I remember correctly, let me see here. Maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was some people had said that there was the possibility existed that younger blacks today, because especially in a community like Columbia, where blacks and whites get along pretty well here,
Yeah.
and I've had other people say that young blacks will leave Columbia after growing up here and go somewhere else in the country or wherever to make their way in the world, and are almost shocked that all of a sudden they're not as well accepted as things were comfortable for them in Columbia, and compared to that, it raises the question if younger blacks today, even here in Columbia or wherever they may be, might get too comfortable and become complacent in making further gains in equality, and therefore if discrimination should rear its head again, that they wouldn't even recognize it because it's not a part of their past. They wouldn't have that perspective. How would you react to that? Is that a valid concern or not? Or
I'm trying to put together what you're saying. I'm not sure that is a needful concern. I'm not. I really, because I haven't really thought, along that area. I think my attention has been focused in two areas, and that is, one area is that that with this integrated climate that we have, that many blacks would forget that there was something in their past that they needed to be proud of. That true, there had been a struggle, true, but there was some things that lest we forget. If you've ever been hungry and now you have plenty, don't forget that you were ever hungry, okay? That now that you have made progress and you're able to, say, be grade 20, okay? Don't forget that you had an aunt, a mother, an uncle, a cousin that scrubbed floors, washed clothes on a washboard, was somebody's maid or butler or whatever, you know. Don't forget that, because even in that menial surrounding, they may have contributed to a governor or a president, a doctor, a lawyer or a nurse. They may have contributed to the raising of those people. You know, because we've come this distance and we are great 20s in the federal government or whatever, in the state government or whatever, in private business. Don't forget that there was a menial background that helped to make you where you are now. Did I answer your question?
You sure did. Better than I could have. That's for sure. Let me ask you also about, let me ask you a little bit about Columbia, if I may.
Oh, mm-hmm.
How did the older blacks that were here in the county before Columbia came, how did they react to Columbia initially coming in?
I can remember at one time, Anita Reeve, Charles Whalen, Silas Craft, and I sitting on the Locust Church steps. We had an ad hoc housing committee, and I can remember Anita saying, "When do you become a real Howard County?" When, how long do you have to be here in order to be accepted as a Howard Countyan? And, I've forgotten what the response is. But in the early days of Columbia, I didn't like it. I hated to see it come. I didn't want it to come. Seriously, I didn't. But I must give James Rouse credit. And that is that he didn't just come into the county and begin to building. When he came to the county, he set up meetings with everyone, with interested people, with the county commissioners, with whomever, and told them his plan. And was willing to talk to us concerning his plan for Columbia. I mean, and not only insofar as housing, education, but also religion, because I can remember meeting over at this Christ Church right around on Oakland, Christ Episcopal Church, okay? And I can remember the meeting there, and I can remember the different ministers or lay people from the various churches being there, and we were told what the plan for the county was.
And has Columbia ultimately been a good influence or a bad influence on the lives of black Howard Countyans?
That's difficult to say, because I believe was quite a person during those years, insofar as the NAACP was concerned. He was president, and he contributed quite a bit to whatever, and Solace contributed quite a bit to whatever here in Howard County the black person did. I must give him that, because that accolade, because he was a tremendous person. He's been a tremendous help to the black community. And
I've only heard wonderful things about him, and I look forward to meeting him. I know he went through his heart attack a few months ago.
Yes, I haven't seen him since he had that. I haven't talked with him, but
I'm certainly hoping when he feels a little better, I hope it's soon, to interview him for this, of course.
yeah.
Very important. Of course, he was 1/3 of the book that Alice wrote. But what I asked you before was about the ultimate influence of Columbia on all of Howard County's black population. I was sort of asking for a value judgment on your part. Is it ultimately a good thing, a positive effect on the black community here in the county, or a negative effect, or how do you feel?
I think that depends largely upon the person. Whatever the interest of a person is, that the impact of Columbia, if you are a person that,
Yeah. I know what you mean about eating the meat and throwing in the bone, yeah. I understand that. Let's see. Gee, what else did I have here? Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. You're starting to talk about Silas Craft. What was it about? I should say, what is it about? I don't want to talk like he's not with us. What is it about Mr. Craft's personality that made him such a wonderful influence on everyone?
Solace is like everybody's brother. He can be a very warm, loving person. And, no matter who it is, he was able to communicate with everybody. Of course, he's an educator, and so he knew everybody. He had been principal of the Harriet Tubman School. I don't know. Solace is just a man with many talents, I think. I don't know what else to say about him.
He seems to have been able to bring people together.
Yes, definitely. Yes, and when he came to this county, he walked from here to Cooksville. He went in every home. Everybody met Silas. Everybody knew Silas. And of course, at that time, the only high school in Howard County was in Cooksville. And I think one of the things that when he was walking was that he was selling encyclopedia, I think. Then later it was the NAACP and membership, and in the NAACP, and the reason why we should be members of the NAACP.
Why was he able to achieve the action on issues and bringing people together and coagulating action on issues? Why was he so successful in being able to do that? Why do people?
I don't know. Silas just had that quality. He had the quality, as I said, of being able to communicate on whatever level, and he commanded respect.
That certainly says it. Let's see, what else do I want to ask? I think I'm exhausted. How are you?
Oh, great. I'm okay. I just wonder.
What do you wonder?
How this is going to be.
You're going to find out. I'm going to make sure you see it, that's for sure.
Okay.